You have taken a very non-traditional path following your degree from Georgia Tech at a premier institution. You studied biomedical engineering, essentially a title that most people would dream to have, to then go pursue a very traditional but great paying engineering job. You basically said, I'm not going to do that. And you have started your own company in a number of different ways to actually gain income. And you actually just recently got back from Bali, where you were for a couple months, which I want to discuss in a minute. I want to ask a bit more pointed question, which is, how do you feel as someone who is doing essentially what so many people dream to do? And I'm going to use the term escape the matrix. And I think that a lot of people want that and they idolize it, but without sort of the qualities that I think that you present and the actual work you did to get there. I think that people think it's either easy or that maybe they should do that, and actually their personality may indicate otherwise. And so I'm wondering how that journey has been for you. And obviously, I'm sure there were times where you were a little iffy on it, or maybe you weren't, but I want to hear about your journey to actually saying, hey, I'm not going to take the 9 to 5. I'm going to go pursue my own thing.
Yeah, a lot to touch on there. And I'll start at least with kind of addressing the audience or the people that might like, hey, I want this non-traditional path. I want to work online. I want to be able to travel. I want to do X, Y, and Z. That is awesome. I'm extremely bullish in like the nature of like the work that I do, the program that I've built, and the content is like curating a sense of heightened self-awareness, like making sure that what you want is what you want. And you're not a product of mimetic desire. You don't want to live in Dubai and drive the Rolls Royce because Iman Ghazi does that. And you don't want to have like supercars because Andrew Tate has them, but you actually intrinsically find those things valuable to you. Like there's nothing wrong with having any XYZ desire, even this sort of lifestyle that we're alluding to, but you need to make sure that it is suited to you, because what is suited to you may not be that. And ultimately, like, I think a lot of people place desires out into the future that if I get X, Y, and Z, then I'll be happy, or then I'll be fulfilled, then I'll be the person I want to be. But like, you can still be depressed in a Ferrari on the beach, whatever it may be. So I would just say, like, always assess who you are first, and then the external world will take care of itself. But for myself personally, I grew up kind of always knowing I wanted to be an entrepreneur. It was something that, while my dad did choose the traditional path for himself and predominantly out of wanting to protect and provide for our family, which I'm eternally grateful for the life it provided, he always toted and talked about entrepreneurship as being something really, really special. He always kind of put forth these like big characters, whether it was through history or like Steve Jobs, who in our lifetime passed, but we got to see him while he was still alive, and just putting those people and like pedestalizing them and like what they were able to do and impact the world. I always thought of myself somehow fitting into that world. But as you also are aware, you can't check the box when you graduate, like entrepreneurship. You can't sign up. You can't apply to that. You have to build something. So I graduated with a biomedical engineering degree, took a job at a medical device startup, and then in parallel made an investment into like an online course mastermind that helped me facilitate building my online business. Did that in parallel for about 9 to 10 months. And then, as we were talking about coming in before this podcast, made the decision to make that leap to quit with about like 4 to 5 months of like savings and runway. And everyone's calculus for like their burning the boats moment. If you want to know more about my personal story, I did a podcast like called Burning the Boats, like talking about my specific mindset. But again, it falls back on self-awareness. Like, what would my right time would be later than some, earlier than others. And the way that I'm choosing to live my life is a product of everything that's brought me here. And I've observed taking the safe route in my personal father and family's path, as well as other anecdotal experiences, as well as many content creators and podcasts, et cetera, like ad infinitum almost. I'm looking at that data set and saying, like, if I choose this path, the traditional whatever, I know where it can and would likely take me. I just didn't want the outcome, so I opted out of the game. I don't know that what I'm choosing to do now will give me the things that are on the vision board necessarily, or the goals that the 24-year-old version of me aims at. But I do know that playing a completely different game is likely to give me different outcomes. And so I was very risk prone in the traditional sense, but I was just very intentional with defining to myself what risk is. I have like tattooed on my arm, Memento Mori. It's the sign out of my podcast, the Latin phrase, remember that you will die. And to me, that meditation on death, reminding yourself that your time is not only finite, Like it does have a fixed amount of time that you're here, but it's also not guaranteed. You know, like we're young men, we take care of our health. Ideally, we get a good amount of time more, right? At least double our lifespan, triple what we've lived so far. But it's not guaranteed that like we leave this podcast and I get hit by a stinger bus and I'm just toast, right? Like my story ends there. And knowing that, I like to lay my head to rest every single day, knowing, or at least being able to say to myself that I'm happy with not only how that day went, but like how my life was lived up until that point. And it came to the place where I was sitting day after day in that job, trying to build what I was on the side. And I was like, am I happy with how these days are going? Would I regret not taking the jump? So I made the leap, and it's been, I guess, almost a full calendar year since. So I haven't ended up in a van down by the river. It's working out as magically as I could have imagined. And so that's where we find ourselves today.
It's an amazing story. The one thing that I want to touch on, because I really agree with you, is I made a whole episode on my personal one about living with intent is what I call it. And essentially playing the game, which you did, which is let's play this out. And let's say where this ends up, you know, and especially on the safe route, it's a bit more predictable, right? And so saying, you know, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, if I work my ass off and I succeed on the game that I'm playing, do I want that outcome? And if the answer is no, then you better make some shifts quickly because you're playing the wrong game. And so I think that a lot of people don't even do that due diligence, maybe because they've been told that that end goal is what they want, or they just didn't put a lot of thought into it. And they're like, this is the safe path. And they just take the next step without ever looking in the distance. So I completely agree with that line of thinking of saying, hey, am I playing the right game? I like that you phrased it that way. I'll probably be borrowing on that in future episodes, but no, that's incredible. And then you recently went to Bali for a couple months to really pursue this thing and actually connect with other creators out there. And I don't know too much about what's going on out there. I know that coworking is huge out there, but I want to hear what that experience was like. What did you gain from it? And it sounds, you were telling me before the podcast that you plan on going back next year.
Yeah. So I kind of leading up to the trip was in this space where I had done a lot of like the back end. I had kind of framed my offer. I had revisited rebranded my website. I had done back end on how I was doing outreach, all these things kind of business wise. And I felt like everything was relatively set. But I still wasn't seeing kind of like, I guess, quantum leaps that I was looking for. And I knew that if I was going to make a big jump, it wasn't going to come from, you know, minimizing spend and just dragging out like the slow burn. Like I needed to make some sort of big shift. And I felt like that shift was in people. And I had connected with enough online creators that had at least recommended that Bali was on the list, and it had been there for a while. But I just had kind of this intuitive call, and like, I don't want people to lose me as like a woo-woo spiritual guru or anything, but I definitely have come into more of a nuanced experience of my intuition and God and spirituality in this last year. And I have no other way to say than I just felt like I should go. I didn't have anyone specifically I was going to see, but I knew that, like you alluded to, co-working's big, creative entrepreneurship is big. And additionally, lifestyle as well. Like I'm very big on kind of just healthy living, like being in the sun, touching the ground. I love to surf, all of those types of things. And that environment, it just essentially facilitates the life I want. And so even if I was the only one there, I'd probably have a decent time in that little block of sand, but it also so happens that a bunch of amazing people are there. So I decided on a pretty short notice to like book the ticket, and what was originally going to be a 1 month trip turned into 2. I had to leave because the visa only gives you 60 days before you have to leave and come back. Then I did a short stint in Australia, then went to Thailand after that, and now I'm back here. But the trip was amazing. I think it helped expose a lot of like limiting beliefs for myself. Also be very empowering, like we were talking about. Like when you step into something that is uncommon, especially being a creator, there's like 2 sides as I describe it. Like there's one that people are very familiar with the terminology, which is imposter syndrome. And the other side of that double-edged sword is identity lag. So imposter syndrome being you are worried about the opinions of other people pointing towards you. But pretty quickly in your creator journey, you get over that because it's like, fuck it. Like they're not thinking about me in the first place, but even if they are, they're not going to stop me from my dreams. But the kind of shady other side of that is the identity lag, where your internal brain doesn't know the new version of you yet. And you can't confidently look in the mirror and say, I am a content creator, or I am an online entrepreneur, or I am a fashion designer, or whatever the thing is for you. And that just takes time, right? You have to give your brain the new data set. So now it's like, this is what we do. We are no longer an engineer or a student athlete or whatever your former versions and identities were. But it was really awesome for me to start shedding those, because you're in an environment where so many people around you are doing the same thing. And you're like, it is normal. It is normal somewhere. And here is one of those places. It's not the only place. But I had spent like that first year very much like in the lab. Like, I hate the kind of mental masturbation around monk mode and this grind set stuff, but it does take a period of time like that. And like I said, 10 months or so at a startup working 7 to 5, then I'd work on this in the morning, at night, all weekend. So like I lived in an apartment for a year, basically, not really doing too much adventuring. And I think the human spirit craves a little bit of expansion and experience. So my time came, and that was the product of this past trip. And then I had such a good time that I certainly see myself going back for sure.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. I think that particularly when it comes to meeting people who are in similar identities that you either now want to prescribe yourself to, or even are further along on their journeys, I truly believe that the attitude that essentially you do need to go into a hole and come out 10 years later, and that's how you'll be successful, is shooting yourself in the foot. I think that I like the term that you use, quantum leap. I think that there are people where it'll be a conversation at a coffee shop that can literally alter the course of your life. And so putting yourself in as many scenarios where that's possible, I think, is really what you need to do to make sure that you have all of the strings to pull on, because you don't know which one will have the biggest outcome.
Yes, dude. And I heard this phrase recently, which I kind of like, which is like entropy maxing. And somebody's like, the frame is that when you're in your early 20s, trying to assess what your thing may be, the direction you might go with your life, the thing you should be maximizing or optimizing for is not yet things like mastery in one vertical, but putting yourself in as many different environments and exposing yourself to different skills and experiences and data sets, books, podcasts, et cetera, just giving yourself enough information that you're allowing entropy in the universe, God, whatever, to work in your favor and give you that random serendipitous encounter with the person who's like, I really like your attitude. I have this position at a startup. I was looking for a software engineer. Like, do you want to go build a $100 million business? Boom, your life's changed forever. Or you go to you're walking through the park and you hear music, you follow the music, and you're like, then you fall into this new school of religion and it completely changes your belief set. Like, just all kinds of crazy different things if you just continue to explore with an open mind and are pursuing, I guess, entropy, right? Like, you're allowing for the magic of the universe to work in your favor by exposing yourself and putting yourself out there.